Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Motivational Intelligence Podcast, where we take an immersive dive into the minds of extraordinary people. And the guy we have on this podcast today is one of less than 500 people on the planet that has climbed the 7 summits. The 7 summits are the tallest mountains on all 7 continents. So that includes Mount Everest, Kilimanjaro, Denali, Aconcagua, even Vincent in Antarctica, which I got to imagine was tough. So this is Kevin Flynn. Kevin is a partner at Martino Flynn LLC, a full-service advertising and public relations agency located in upstate New York. So in addition to being one of less than 500 people to accomplish the 7 summits, Kevin is also an award-winning advertising executive and an instrument-certified pilot. So this is going to be a good episode for you. We're going to do something special for this episode. Kevin has a book called Mount Everest, Confessions of an Amateur Peak Bagger, which is a great read. And we're going to do a giveaway of a signed copy of this book. Kevin's going to sign a copy. So the back of the book reads a true story, warts and all, of what really happened to ad exec and amateur climber Kevin Flynn during his days at the top of the world. In this riveting, entertaining adventure, Flynn takes the reader along for the ride through each stage of his expedition, step by precarious step, from base camp to summit and back again. In May 2004, Kevin Flynn reached the summit of Mount Everest, but not without tears, laughter, failures, near-death experiences, and great friendships. If you've ever wondered what it would be like for a mere mortal to attempt Mount Everest, this book is as close as it gets. So we're going to do a giveaway of a signed copy of his book. So to enter, just go to tological.com/giveaway, tological.com/giveaway. All you got to do is drop your email in and you'll be entered to win. We'll be in touch with the winner in about a week or so. So until next time, please enjoy this episode of the Motivational Intelligence Podcast. I really think you're going to like it.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is produced by the team at Too Logical. Too Logical is an international corporate training firm and the world's leading expert in motivational intelligence, which is the ability to understand, manage, and change the motives people have. Too Logical offers over 30 different keynotes, workshops, and full training courses to small, medium, and large Fortune 500 companies in 53 countries, a lot of which you're probably familiar with. Pfizer, Bank of America, GE, Constellation Brands, P&G, and more. All solutions are completely customized, and the feedback from these sessions will blow your mind. If you have any training or speaking needs or just want to say hey, head over to toological.com.
Well, hello everybody. We have a fantastic individual with us today. One of those people who you really step back and sort of humbles you in terms of what one can accomplish in the course of their lifetime. So we've got a gentleman with us today. His name's Kevin Flynn. Kevin is one of less than 500 people, at least according to the research that I could find, who actually has climbed all 7 of the highest mountains in the world, or the highest mountains on the 7 continents, including Denali in Alaska. Is it Aconcagua, right?
Aconcagua.
Aconcagua.
The hard one to pronounce.
That one doesn't roll off the tongue
No,
so
it does
easy.
not.
In Argentina, Vincent in Antarctica, Kilimanjaro in Africa, and of course Mount Everest. He's also climbed all 46 of the Adirondack Peaks. Has written a wonderful book, actually, if anybody's interested, that you can pick up on Amazon, entitled Mount Everest, Confessions of an Amateur Peak Bagger. Great title, and it tells a wonderful story of the adventures of climbing Mount Everest. So I definitely would recommend the book. And in addition to which, Kevin is a instrument-rated private pilot and runs a highly successful and award-winning advertising agency. So pretty phenomenal resume there, Kevin. Duly impressed.
Well, thank you. Truth be told, most of my career and my hobbies have been kind of accidental. Yeah. So I got into the business by accident. After my undergraduate degree, I was studying to be environmental education, maybe a park ranger, because I always loved the outdoors. Yeah. And fell in love with a girl there, and she had gotten accepted to vet school at Cornell. Okay. So I devised this plan. My father had started our agency in 1967. My sister was working with him, so it was just a little family retail broadcast shop. And I thought, well, I wasn't ready to go to grad school so I could be with my girlfriend. I would move back to Rochester, intern for a year, and of course they paid me $25 a week, so I waited tables at night to get by, and then go back to Cornell to grad school, and I would be with my girlfriend. Right. And that plan worked out absolutely spot on perfect, with the exception of she dumped me after about a month into that plan. But I still went back to Cornell and got a master's in communications, and then came back and have been working in the business for actually my entire professional career. So, but really by accident.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
But it was a happy accident.
There you go. That's oftentimes the best things happen that way. So tell us you said you were always into the outdoors and those kinds of things. So were you, kind of an adventurous kid? How did the mountain climbing come about?
As a kid, well, I'm the black sheep of the family. I have two brothers and a sister, and my parents, their idea of roughing it was, the Holiday Inn kind of deal. Right. And so they always thought I was a bit weird. But growing up, we had a creek in our backyard, so it was fun to just go out exploring, and I liked that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I was graduated from high school, the summer of '75, that I and a couple of other friends did a backpacking trip up into the high peaks of the Adirondacks. And we really were pretty poorly prepared, but we went after it anyways. We were out, I think, about 6 days or so in the backcountry, and I climbed 3 or 4 mountains. And my first peak was Mount Haystack, and it was the first time I got above timberline. And I'm like, wow, it's kind of windy, it's rocky, my hands were involved. It wasn't technical climbing. Right. But I'm like, wow, this is New York State. This is fantastic. And so I was hooked. At that point, I didn't know there was a 46er club. Right. It's the 46 major peaks in the Adirondacks. Yeah. But after a while, I decided that, hey, that'd be really fun to do. And I kept going back up there, oftentimes alone, and I would just backpack alone because I didn't have friends who were necessarily into it. Not always the case, but after doing about 12 or 13 of them, I go, I think I want to do them. Okay. I want to do them all. So I did them, and I thought, wow, but big mountains, that's crazy. I would never, I heard someone died on Denali. Yeah. Oh, my God, to have ropes and hang from ropes, that's just stupid. But so kind of a happy accident. Once I finished the 46, I had some friends and like, hey, well, the mountains, we want to go in the winter. And I'm like, oh, it's cold. Yeah. I don't really want to do that. But we went. It was pretty great. And that led to going to Mount Washington in New Hampshire, which it's a little over 6,000 feet. And it's probably the most dangerous and nastiest small mountain weather-wise. Okay. It's impressive. The highest wind speed was recorded on there for a lot of years until recently, over 200 miles an hour. Wow. And in fact, 1 out of every 3 days in the winter is what they call a century day, where the peak gust exceeds 100 miles an hour. So, of course, we thought this would be great. So it was the first time I put on crampons and an ice axe. And crampons are the things that grip into the snow, the spikes kind of stuff. Right. And I loved it. I felt like Spider-Man on higher angle type terrain. I thought this was fantastic. We had a great summit day in the winter. It was pretty cold and windy, but not 100-mile-an-hour winds. But I think I've climbed it 5 times in the winter. Wow. But I was like, well, if I can do this, again, this is sort of my accidental way of jumping into things. Yeah. I was like, well, maybe you could take another step and go to Denali in Alaska. And I went in 1992, and that was my first big mountain. And I went with a guide service because I didn't know ropes and crevasse rescue and all those other kinds of necessary skills that you need for mountaineering. And we had a great trip. We were on the mountain 3.5 weeks, and we got to high camp at about 17,200 feet, and the weather just stunk. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. Yeah. And we waited up there. We spent 7 days and 6 nights at that altitude, and it just didn't get better. Huh. And so we retreated, and I thought, oh my gosh, I will never again get this opportunity, because at the time business was small. We were really struggling, like many businesses go through some of that stuff. So we were kind of, pretty poor, just making ends meet barely. Yeah. And so I go, I'll never have that opportunity again. And lo and behold, 11 months later, I'm back on the mountain with 3 friends, and we went on our own and did everything as far as all the food, the planning, the preparation. So being self-sufficient, I think that was really great.
Yeah.
And again, we get up to high camp, and Denali's just beautiful, by the way. The Alaska Range, if you can ever get there, I mean, it's stunning. I love the Adirondacks, and they're charming and wonderful and awesome, but that's a whole nother level. So we get to high camp, and it's kind of deja vu again because weather stinks, and I think we were up there about 5 days, and finally we got a break in the weather.
Okay.
Went for the summit. Everything's going great. There's 2 rope teams of 2 each, and one of my buddies goes, man, he pulled the plug. He goes, I can't go on. So I thought, They're like, well, you should take him down, go back to high camp.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to lose my chance at the summit. So, but I did. He was a great, really good guy.
Sure.
We went back to high camp, and I thought, oh, gosh. So I kind of trolled around. There were some other climbing groups up there, and to see if maybe I could catch a little piece of rope and go up with someone else the next day.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the folks that I had been with the year before, the guiding group, said, sure, we'd love to have you. Oh. And so the next morning, early, went up and was able to get to the summit. And it was just an exquisite bluebird day, and it was great and super happy, and long day, but great day. And that kind of led to, it's like, wow, I think every couple of years I'd like to do something really big in the mountains. Of course, Everest, I knew about it. That would be really cool, but that's not for me. I'm a mere mortal. There's no way I could do something like that. But Aconcagua seemed like a nice place to go to South America. So we went down there and spent about 2.5 weeks on the mountain. Bad summit weather. Went home without getting to the top.
Okay.
But
that's kind of a theme then. I mean, you go through all this tremendous effort to go to these places and to start to scale up there, and you're up there. You're kind of crossing your fingers that excuse me, that you're going to have good enough weather to actually be able to make the summit.
Yeah, it's not always a slam dunk.
Yeah.
So and sometimes it's not just the weather too. Sometimes you may not just feel up to it.
Right.
Can run out of time at some point. I mean, we generally would try to have more than enough time to make up for bad weather and whatnot. But sometimes it just, the body wasn't feeling good enough. But that was not the case in Aconcagua.
Right.
Just the weather was not so great.
Okay.
But so came back, then went to Kilimanjaro with my friend Gary Fallison, who is also co-author of the book, who, if you like the book, he deserves a lot of the credit. Okay. He's a great guy and a great writer. But he and I went up to Kilimanjaro, and we had a great experience. I've been to a lot of places, but you get to Alaska and you really appreciate how much we have, how rich we are, and how different people live in other areas. So that's another thing about the mountains I really like, is that you get to experience all these unique cultures besides the natural beauty, and meet a lot of different types of people. And there's a certain camaraderie amongst mountaineers. Yeah. But we had a great time on Kilimanjaro. And Gary actually arranged for it. You have to take a guide, even though it's not the hardest mountain to climb. Okay. I think it's 19,300 feet and change. But it's a desperately poor country, Tanzania. Okay. So one of the ways they get some revenue is that the locals are guides and porters and a cook. So for just Gary and me, we had a guide, an assistant guide, a cook, and 3 porters. Wow. And it is ridiculous. We get to our first campsite, and they lay out a checkered cloth. We have popcorn. They've got tea. Wow. I'm like, this is kind of sweet. I could get used to this gentlemanly climbing. Whereas on Denali, we're carrying huge loads. And, it's 15 below, and we're cooking everything ourselves, making it all happen. But now we're gentlemen climbers.
There you go.
And so we had a great time there. And then I did go back to Aconcagua. Okay. I think 2001. And I was able to make the summit. I went with one of my buddies. He turned around on summit day, but I did summit. Okay. And then when I got back to our high camp, I had a little bit of a cough, which is not highly unusual because the air is really thin and super dry. Okay. So, but I wasn't sick or it wasn't anything terrible, but I was like, I'm through with big mountains. Yeah. This is over. And then that cure never lasts long. You get back from a big mountain, you forget all the pain. Yeah. And what you went through, and it's a good thing, or you might never go back. And And I said, well, if I could do that, maybe the 7 Summits thing could go.
So it was really at that point you had made the decision that this is something I want to go after.
Yeah, and I made the decision before I told anyone.
Okay.
Because I kind of let it percolate and going, wow, can I really am I worthy? You know, one of the things in my book, the kind of premise is it's not like I'm some big hotshot guide doing extraordinary things, that it's more from the basis of, you know, a fairly ordinary, regular guy who can do extraordinary things if you really put yourself to it and you do the training and mentally you get where you want to go. So I was a little bit shy about telling anyone because once it's out there and you say something, it's like,
you're
well,
kind of
maybe
committed.
I should follow through.
Yeah.
And of course, I had to talk with my wife first.
Yeah. I love that in the book, the FWA, full wife approval. You know?
Foi.
Yeah.
And foi was a word I invented. I like to coin some words. Is that you can't go anywhere without full wife approval. Now, my wife's really supportive, and the cool thing is she and I met in 89 and were married in 90. I introduced her to the Adirondacks.
Okay.
And she became a 46er over the years. In 2003, she finished on Mount Haystack. Or not a coincidence, but
where you
that
started.
was the first mountain that I started on. So that was really cool. So I remember we were having a conversation on our back deck, and I'm like, honey, I kind of think I want to go and give Everest a shot, you know? She goes, yeah, I knew it was coming.
Huh.
She goes, okay, but there's certain conditions. You know, this is me getting foi,
Right,
full wife
right.
approval. You have to tell me everything that goes on. If it's going to be 6 weeks or 10 or 12 weeks, don't sugarcoat anything.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure about everything. I was already physically quite fit, but notch that up to another level.
Sure.
You know, make sure that you are totally dialed in as well as you can be physically. And I was always kind of the frugal mountaineer, so make sure you get the best equipment that you can get, which makes sense. So I did all those things. And when I did sign on with International Mountain Guides, they were the folks I went with in 2002 and then back in 2004.
Right.
There's many forms, but one of the forms that caught my eye was called the Body Disposal Election Form.
Wow.
Which is, should you perish on the mountain?
Right, which about 300 or so people have, so it's not,
it's not that uncommon, sadly. But should you perish on the mountain, what do we do with your body? You know, one is we can try and take the body down and repatriate it and bring it back to the U.S. Could be highly dangerous, ridiculously expensive, not necessarily recommended. 2, we can have the Sherpas try and bring you back down to maybe base camp and do a cremation ceremony.
Okay.
Or 3, we can basically throw your body into a crevasse, commit it to the mountain, and be done with it and less safe, which was the option I chose. So I had to share that with my wife, so that went over.
That becomes very real at that point, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Stuff just got real. And so foi, there's another kind of funny thing with foi, is I have this colleague I work with, and he read the book, and we talked about it. He goes, yeah, we have a derivative of that called poi. I go, what's poi?
Yeah.
He goes, well, that's when you get wife approval, but they're not happy about it. It's pissed wife approval. so
Grudgingly.
you're going to do it. Yeah. It's like, yeah, fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
the eye roll. Everybody can relate to that. Yeah.
the epic eye roll. So that was kind of funny.
Oh my goodness. So that first trip to Everest, it's a little over 29,000 feet.
Yep.
So physically, obviously, you're in a situation, as you talked about earlier, you've got very low oxygen, so you have to have supplemental oxygen so that you're able to breathe. Talk to us a little bit about just the mental side of wrapping your head around. I mean, you think about even filling out that form and saying, hey, what do I want done with my body if I don't make it? Right. So that's, how do you get mentally ready for that? Or kind of what was your mental state as you were coming into that?
Well, that's a great point. And my mental state was really apprehensive.
Sure.
And filled with some angst and worry. I mean, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
But more than there should have been. And I learned a lot. It took me 2 tries to get up. So the second trip in 2004 was ultimately able to ring the bell on the summit, so to speak. But going in there was just a lot going on. So there's all this self-doubt. It's like, well, I'm going to Everest. I said it out loud. I'm actually on the plane there, and I'm in Kathmandu, and we're flying into the Lukla, which is where you begin your trekking journey to base camp about 40 miles away. And you go, God, do I belong here? And at that same time, there was a Maoist uprising in Nepal. Okay. And it wasn't long after 9/11 as well. So the world was a funky place. So I was worried about that. Is the Maoist uprising gonna screw us up?
Right.
Am I gonna not be good enough? And on the trek on day 3 or so, you round a corner out of Namche Bazaar in the Khumbu Valley, and you turn around the corner and there's Everest. And it's it's still another 30 miles away, but it looks impossibly high.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? So there's concerns about that, and I was a little sick on the trek. It's no one stays completely healthy.
Yeah.
I had budgeted about 12 weeks for the journey, and door to door on the first trip it was 10 weeks, so it's a long time. But the idea of the worry and the concern, that first trip, I just, I give advice to people sometimes, like a couple things. One is don't worry twice, or the things that you worry about and kind of consume your mind, 90% of it, either it never happens anyways, or it's out of your control. So you spend all this needless energy worrying about stuff, and it's not. And mentally, you want to be really strong and in the game and be a real bulldog. So
what is don't worry twice?
Don't worry twice is if it does happen, it's going to happen. Okay. So why worry about it until it does actually happen?
All right.
So,
all right. That's great advice. For in any aspect of life.
No, it really is. And I didn't make it up. Someone told me that. So I like that advice. But that really was, mentally, physically, yes, it's hard to climb the mountain.
Sure.
There's just a lot to do, and because you're on it for a long period of time, and acclimatization takes a long time because you're at higher altitudes. You start at about 9,000 feet. We trekked in. It took us about 10 days to go 35, 40 miles, which you could go a lot faster, but getting to Everest Base Camp is about 17,500 feet.
Okay. So which in and of itself is really high.
Yeah, that's pretty high. But if you go too quickly, you don't develop enough red blood cells, more red blood cells, so that you can properly acclimatize and deal with the less, oxygen available to you. So you take your time up there. And so I was sick for a few days on the trek in. I was wondering if I was even going to make it to base camp, which was pretty sad. But then we spent a lot of time on the mountain. I want to say about 8 weeks. And one of the reasons it takes a long time to climb is that you climb it several times. Okay. So you'll go up after resting at base camp. When you first get there, it's hard to breathe, but you get used to it. And then you go up through the Khumbu Icefall, which is the first barrier.
How long does it take to just get so that you can breathe relatively normally at base camp?
They say that once you reach about 9,000 feet or so, if you average about 1,000 feet of elevation gain per day, you can do reasonably well with that.
Okay.
So we would after 3 or 4 days at base camp, and we practiced a little bit in the Khumbu Icefall, and that's the part people really remember, where they have some of those ladders over crevasses, and there's all these big seracs.
So where they lash the ladders together,
yes.
and you got to,
and you walk over them. There's fixed lines around there, so if you were to fall, it'd be pretty inelegant, but you shouldn't fall all the way down. But it would not be nice.
Yeah.
So fortunately, it didn't fall. But the Khumbu Icefall is really interesting. An icefall really is like a frozen waterfall. It's part of the glacier.
Okay.
So it's moving, coming down. I think it moves like 2 or 3 feet a day on average, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So it's these jumbled, huge blocks of ice that can be the size of train cars, and there's some are hanging precariously, and a route is put through the icefall. So sometimes you can just be at the wrong place at the wrong time. You can be doing everything right, and if something falls on you, the joke was you don't really need to wear a helmet because you're going to get
it's not going to do you any good.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. So you climb. You said you climb the mountain several times. So it's the acclimation and I remember from the book is there 4 camps that?
There are 4 camps. So the first camp you get to is Camp 1, just under 20,000 feet.
Okay.
And spent a couple days there. Then went up to Camp 2, which is about through the western Coombe, which is very, very pretty, and you get a really good look at the Lhotse face. You can only see the shoulder of Everest. You can't quite see the tippy top just yet.
Okay.
It's kind of hidden. And Camp 2 is about 21,300 feet, and it's sometimes called Advanced Base Camp. So there's a couple of Sherpas there who are cooking for you. At Camp 1, we cook for ourselves.
Okay.
And we were what were called non-guided clients. So we worked on our own, but we had tremendous logistical support.
Okay.
There was the high altitude Sherpas were amazing and really great. So it sounds like, oh, geez, you're on your own.
Yeah.
It's not quite that. But we were reasonably self-sufficient, but with lots of logistical support.
Okay.
So we spent a couple more nights up at Camp 2, and I had a bit of a pounding headache.
Okay.
I'm like, oh gosh, am I, again,
So
the worry
physically
comes
you're-
through.
yeah,
Physically,
yeah.
I'm like, well, maybe I'm just not meant for this altitude.
Sure.
Because it was the highest sleeping altitude I had ever been at before.
Yeah.
Previously, it was on Aconcagua at about 19.5. So we come back down to base camp, and when we first got to base camp, it's like I can't breathe. When we get back down to base camp, it's like, woohoo, thick air, it's great, I'm running around. And so then you rest and recover for another 4 or 5 days. You try to keep active.
Okay.
So I just would sometimes go into a little village called Gorak Shep just to get some exercise, go downhill a little bit
Right.
for, maybe a 5-hour round trip, if
Okay.
that. So then we went back up, and so this was supposed to be the last acclimatization rotation before we're going for the summit.
Yeah.
So we do well. We go up to Camp 1, spend a night, Camp 2, spend a couple nights. And that year, oh my God, we had this amazing, about a 30-hour windstorm that it just rocked. I got some cool video of it.
Yeah.
We had to jump out of the tents, and because it's on a lateral moraine, there's some rocks around. So we helped to bolster our tents with extra rocks. And it was probably blowing 80 miles an hour, a little bit more. And it was about, like I said, 30 hours or so. One of the cook tents got a little bit shredded.
Okay.
But I hung up and really didn't sleep very well. I hung up with my back against the tent poles into the wind as it just kind of raged. So we had to wait an extra day. And then that subsided. We went up to Camp 3, up the Lhotse face. And the Lhotse face is really steep and icy, and you don't want to fall there. There are fixed lines in there so that are anchored into the ice. Okay. And so you're double clipped in, one with an ascender, which is a mechanical device that you can slide up one way, and then it grips coming back. Okay. And then also a safety carabiner that's tied to your sit harness. Okay. That as you're passing ice screws and pickets and things like that, anchors, so that you would put your crampon above the point of protection so that you're still roped in, then remove the ascender and go like that. So it's very important not to miss a clip.
Sure.
So that was a nasty, slow go up to 24,000 feet, steep, just unrelenting. And then we finally got to this little desperate Camp 3, which is 24,000 feet. And that's the kind of thing, if you have to go gather snow to melt for water and cooking and whatnot, or relieve yourself or whatever, you want to either be clipped in or just be really careful. People have gone out to relieve themselves. A person did, slipped, fell, gone. Wow. And no one's ever survived a fall on the Lhotse face. Okay. So, obviously be careful. It's a desperate little perch. Sure. So we spent a miserable night there breathing without supplemental oxygen to try and shock our systems into getting some more oxygen. The next morning we wake up and it's a bit of a storm. It's snowing, it's blowing probably 35, 40 miles an hour, so not crazy. Really reduced visibility. I'm freaked out a little bit, like, we should get out of here. I don't want to get altitude sickness. And we can follow the fixed lines down. And we were just one of two groups up there. There were three of us from our group, and then two other guys, an Englishman and a guy from Czech Republic. They were like, okay, I got this idea. Let's head down. So we start to head down, and we have walkie-talkies. We're talking to base camp. So we do have, we're getting advice, and everyone's listening to us. Right. And, gee, what are they going to do? And it's really nasty. So this guy, Ted Wheeler, and I take off. And Ted is actually, coincidentally, the mayor of Portland, Oregon, and a really great guy. So he and I left the tent, and this is how weird it can be when it's loud and you're wearing all this clothes and stuff. And this other guy, Stuart Smith, he was going to leave the tent too, but we had started down, Ted and I, a little bit. And Stuart never really got out of the tent. He got out. He was putting his crampons on. His feet got really cold. He says, screw it, I'm staying.
Okay.
So we're getting advice. Ted, you and Kevin, you keep coming down, and you stay there. And I mean, we could do whatever we want, but we were getting good advice. So we're heading down. We go down about 1,000 feet, and it's just blowing, and it's right in your face. Even though we have goggles and all that other stuff on, it's just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And the going is slow, again, because you can't miss a clip, and going down is oftentimes more dangerous than going up. So we get to a point where I think that somehow the fixed lines had avalanched over.
Okay.
We couldn't find the next, if you want to think of it as breadcrumbs on the way back down to Camp 2, and more importantly, your safety line.
Yeah. I mean, literally your lifeline in that sense, yeah.
So we're like, uh-oh. And we knew pretty quickly that we weren't going to unrope and go down because one slip is death. So we go, we have to reascend. So everyone's listening to this story of us going back up. And we got back there just about as it was getting dark, not quite. And there was some oxygen up there, so we breathed some O's, and we spent the night there. Much better with oxygen. Yeah. It's like night and day. And it still was windy. And the next morning it was windy, but it was clear.
Okay.
So the two guys who were there before us said, hey, Americans, we are heading down. Okay, we'll see you there. And we left about 10 or 15 minutes later. And right as we got out of their tent, the walkie-talkie kind of comes alive and said, there's been a fall on the Lhotse face. No reason to believe it's survivable. And then it's like, so what happened? And so we're talking to Eric Simonson, he was managing the expedition leader. Mm-hmm. And he goes, you better gird yourself because you're going to see evidence that's going to probably be pretty gruesome. And so this one fellow, an Englishman, he apparently missed a clip. No one knows, for sure. Yeah. And you could tell where he kind of bounced on the way down and ended up in a Bergschrund, which is a big giant crevasse at the bottom of that Lhotse face. So that was really unnerving coming down, and that makes you question yourself. So again, trying to keep your mind right and not worry too much and go, well, it could never happen to me. Yeah, but it certainly could.
Yeah, it's right there. So so you're going through the process. The you've kind of got the questioning. You're watching what's going on. So at that point, were you, mentally still in a place where you're going, okay, I can do this, or was it kind of second guessing a little bit the decision making at that point?
Second guessing a little bit, but we have short memories, and there's a little bit of that. One of my chapters in the book is our Death on Everest, our dirty little secret. It's kind of like no one would go to see the low wire act, the high wire act when you're up there a couple hundred feet.
The perception of danger makes it,
It, in a strange, twisted way, makes it a little bit more appealing. So I just resolved just be extra careful. Okay. Make sure this doesn't happen to you. And we're going forward. Okay. So we spent another night or two at Camp 2, went back down to base camp, rested for now our summit run, and you got to try and time the weather. Yeah. The reason that there's such a small weather window is that most people climb Everest in the spring, pre-monsoon. So what happens is, for most of the time, and typically we got there early April, and then a time for a good summit run is anywhere from around May 10th to June 1st. Okay. I mean, it can vary. And the reason for that is that typically earlier, the jet stream is right over the summit. So it's just too nasty, too windy. But what happens is, as the monsoon comes up the Indian subcontinent, it somehow pushes the jet stream away. Okay. So you get this window before the monsoon actually comes. Right. And the jet stream is pushed away that you get some good weather days. Okay. So that's what we were waiting for. And we went up as a group. I guess there were 5 of us, of Western climbers, along with some Sherpa support up high when we got there. But again, not typical guides that may be. So we do well getting to Camp 3 again at 24,000 feet. And so when I left Camp 3, I left the tent a little bit late. And here's the deal. So you leave Camp 3 at 24,000 feet. You're supposed to be on the route by, say, 7 in the morning, no later. Okay. Get to high camp at about 26,200 feet at about 1 p.m. or so. Okay. And then you want to rest, hydrate, eat if you can. And it's hard to eat at altitude. You just don't feel like it. But you need every bit of energy you can muster. Sure. But the thing is, then you want to turn around pretty quickly. And at 9:30, that night, get ready to go to the summit and be out of the tents at about 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Head for the summit, try and tag the summit at about 6, 7 in the morning, and then come back down while there's still plenty of light. And that really limits your time up high. And if you're really strong, you would go below high camp that same day.
Okay. So at high camp, is that what they refer to as the death zone, so to speak?
It's just the start. The death zone starts right around 26,000 feet.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
Okay.
Where your body's just not getting any better.
Okay.
It can't sustain life for long periods of time.
Right. Okay.
And that's why the supplemental oxygen helps a lot.
Yeah.
But it only really brings you down 3,000 or 4,000 feet.
Okay.
So where I really screwed up on that trip was leaving Camp 3. I got out a little bit late. So I'm breathing oxygen.
Right.
But my goggles got fogged up.
Okay.
So now I'm nervous. Like,
can't
how
see.
do I get up here?
Yeah.
And, not panic, but like, this isn't going the way I thought.
Yeah.
But they resolved themselves, and I started going, and I got some advice to, hey, be conservative with your oxygen.
Right.
And I was too conservative, so I moved really slowly. And this is going to sound weird to folks, but thing about big mountains is they're either too cold or too hot. So it was a beautiful day, but there was no wind, and I had my baffled down suit on, and I started sweating. So now I'm going slow, not breathing enough oxygen, and you have to go through a couple of dicey places. One called the Yellow Band, which is this cool like rock face. So in crampons, it's just kind of cumbersome and awkward. Mm-hmm. And again, you're on fixed ropes, and you're way up there.
Yeah,
So it's like, boy, we're not in Kansas anymore sort of moments, right? So we go there, and then there's another thing, the Geneva Spur, which is another little rocky deal to get over. And then I finally pulled into high camp, but not until about 4:15 p.m.
Okay.
Supposed to be there at 1, and I just was kind of, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
So I knew, and this was another mistake, I knew right away that I can't go for the summit tonight.
Okay.
I'm like, can I go tomorrow? I'm like, well, logistically, that's probably going to be a big issue. If the weather's good, we're going tonight. And I cashed in my chips too early.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So I did sleep a little bit. They're all getting ready to go. And I'm like, I feel a little bit better, but I want to be careful.
Yeah.
And I told myself, well, if I got to high camp and I didn't kill myself or anyone else, that would probably be pretty successful.
Okay.
So they went that night, and then I knew the next day it wasn't going to go for me.
So I saw the video on YouTube that I think you recorded that day.
So that's I shot a lot of video there, and I was documenting sort of my feelings on there. And I'm a really big, tough guy, right? And once I knew that I had lost the summit, I basically was crying like Nancy Kerrigan up there. I just felt awful, and I really lied to myself. And this was a mistake. Was that, if I got to high camp, I think in the article you shared with me about putting there could be more rungs on the ladder.
Yeah.
I think I limited myself and said, well, that would be good enough, but it wasn't good enough. I was just so bummed. You put your heart, soul, money, training, ego, everything into this kind of deal. And when the plug gets pulled, which I did essentially on myself, and then I tried to find another way up.
Right.
And the next day wasn't going. The weather wasn't as good, and I knew that I'd lost the summit, and of course I was never going back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was cured forever.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was kind of demoralizing, and we talked about this earlier, but at Camp 2, when I was getting ready to get back down to base camp in thicker air, just as I was leaving, I tripped. I caught a front point on my crampon, and my knee hit a rock, and it hurt like a son of a gun.
Yeah.
And so that was insult to injury. As I limped my way off the mountain, back to base camp, spent a day or two in
physically
base camp.
and mentally kind of.
I was just beat up. And everyone gets beat up to some extent.
Sure.
But I felt, ego-wise, I was just really hurting and crushed from not making it.
Yeah.
And not even getting out of the tent. That's what really bothered me. And in hindsight, and I talked this over with Eric Simonson, he goes, you'd be surprised what the body can do. The mind quits before the body.
Right.
And you probably had it in you to make it. You limited yourself. And so when again, back to the mind games, I absolutely let my mind stop me where I think my body could have made it. But be that as it may, I knew I was cured. I was never going back to big mountains. And then insult to injury, there's a funny chapter in my book. So flying back to the U.S., landed in Los Angeles, and I have to clear customs. and I had an extension visa. It was 60 days and another 15 days in Nepal. And so the customs officer is kind of this big, heavy dude. He's looking at it, and he goes, Nepal, 65, 70 days. What were you doing there?
Yeah.
And if I had summited, I would have said, well, I was climbing Mount Everest because I'm a man. And I'm like, well, I was climbing mountains. Oh, really? What mountain? And I just let it slip out. Well, Everest. And, of course, first thing people say is, they don't say, hey, did you have a great experience? Were you a good teammate? They're like, did you get to the summit? And I'm like, and I try to make myself sound pretty good. Well, no, I got to, high camp at 26,200 feet, the death zone. I was right up there. And he goes, well, how much longer would it have taken to get to the summit? Well, I go, well, if everything went pretty well, like 12, 14 hours. He looks at me, this big, heavy guy. He probably takes the escalator because the stairs are too challenging. He goes, hey, you should have gone. I'm like, oh. Yeah. But I did pay him. I got back at him because one of my chapters in my book is entitled Cheese Dick at LAX. so I kind of...
It's easy to be the armchair quarterback,
right.
know? Yeah.
But you know what? I felt like he was right. I wish I could have given it a go. So I get home, and of course, I'm physically, mentally just beat up. And I think I actually was mildly depressed.
Yeah.
And my wife greets me, and she cried that I didn't make it.
Yeah.
And again, we forget. Mountaineers are quite selfish. We focus on our own goals, and you forget about the loved ones you leave behind.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's easier when you're on the mountain. You know where you are. You know if you're safe. But if you're someone at home and you care about that person, it's like, are they in trouble? Are they in danger? I heard about this guy falling and dying on the Lhotse face, and so you try to downplay that stuff. So my wife was immediately supportive, said, if you want to go back, I know you need to. I fully support you. I go, oh, you're wonderful. Yeah. But don't worry, I'm cured. Yeah. It's not going to happen. And my two business partners at the time, Ray Martino and my brother, Chris Flynn, exact same thing. Yeah. And I'm gone from work.
What a great support system.
Over 2 months. Yep. Super, super pleased about that. And they're like, hey, we totally support if you want to go back. I'm like, oh, give me a hug. I love you guys. But no, I'm cured. Yeah. But the cure doesn't take. You forget the pain, and then you start to re-rack and roll the tapes in your head and go, man, if I had gotten out of the tent, if I had done this better, coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Well, and so many people, they live their lives in that spot, in everything, not just scaling the tallest mountain in the world. So how did you pull yourself kind of out of that kind of depressed or that abyss and go from... I failed in essence.
Sure.
To okay, I'm gonna put on my big boy pants and I'm gonna get my head in the right place and I'm gonna go back and attack this goal again.
Well, coming home and healing up a bit, was helpful. And there wasn't an aha moment where I go, I'm going back.
Yeah.
I just kept going. Oh, if I'd done this, I could have. And then I'm like, son of a gun, I had it.
Yeah,
I know I can do this.
Okay,
and then it's not mad, but it's a resolve.
Yeah,
and I was a much stronger place, and so I said, I want to go, and I didn't want to go back the next year because that was a little too quick. So 2002 was when I didn't make it. So I went back in the spring of 2004.
Okay,
and a much different world.
Yeah,
as far as from the mindset, because now. Yeah, I knew about those Maoist things. That never, again, don't worry twice. It never really materialized. Right. It was never really an issue. I knew that I could get at least a high camp. I knew I had that in me. I knew I could go through the ice fall, which is, the first time through was pretty slow and all that stuff. But I got better, and my skills got better and better, and confidence. And so the next time going through the on the trek, I'm just drinking it all in. I'm enjoying it more. I'm taking more side trips. I know that keeping busy is important. So at a couple points on the trek-in, you stop for like 2 or 3 nights at like 11:05 and at about 14 just to get some more acclimatization. But one of the times we stopped at 14 on April Fool's Day, my buddy, this guy Brian Sheedy, and I and a Sherpa, were like, hey, we're going to take a little hike up what was it called Chikung Ri.
Okay.
Ri stands for peak,
R-I.
Okay. So Chikung is this mountain, and it's about 18.8. We're going from 14. We're like, we're just going to go into Chikung, which is this little teeny village.
Okay.
But we got there in like an hour and 10 minutes, and we had planned to go a little way up that mountain. We're like, we're feeling good. Like, we just kept going and going, and we summited that mountain, and it was a trekking peak, so it was no big deal. But it was way up there. It was about 18,500 feet. So we did about well over 4,000 feet of vertical.
Okay.
And we were fast and strong. And this is just better. I'm in a better place. I'm happier, and get to base camp. And this time it's like, hello, old friend.
Yeah.
I'm back. And, we'll see what happens. And so I much better mentally equipped to do it. And I climbed mostly with this guy, Brian Sheedy, who's actually originally from Syracuse, but now lives in Walla Walla, Washington. He's the outdoor director for Whitman College. Great guy. Another guy, Dan Barter from New England, and this guy, Jason Tangway, who was the assistant expedition leader, but assistant guide. But he wasn't really a guide for us. And he had lost the summit of Everest a few years previous on the north side. And we were going up the south side, the Hillary Tenzing Norgay route. And because they stopped to help someone who was coming down from the summit, 3 guys who were really, really sick. One didn't make it, but they worked really hard and saved those 2 other guys. And he was a 15-minute stroll from making the summit, but he gave it up to help people. And you talk about people walking over bodies and not helping. So this is the kind of character this guy has and strength. And so we decided that the 4 of us would mostly climb together. So again, we didn't have a Sherpa assigned to us or a guide necessarily, but having Jason in our group was really great. And you couldn't ask for better partners. So we did rotations together, not every single one. I did every one with Brian, my buddy there. But our final push for the summit came. We got a weather window, and we went up. There were 5 of us. There was another guy from Canada who was not our favorite necessarily, but he was with us. And the plan was, once you get to high camp, that 4 out of 5 of us, we're going to have a climbing Sherpa with us. So we would carry these pretty big, like about a 17-pound bottle of oxygen on summit day, but the Sherpas would take 2.
Wow.
And so they would use 1 for themselves all day, and we would have 2 for us. Now, the Sherpas are just incredibly strong folks. They're
the unsung heroes, really.
Absolutely. I have a ridiculous amount of respect for them. And they are physiologically predisposed to be better than us because they've been living at altitude for many, many generations. And so they're kind of slight in stature, but they're ridiculously strong and efficient users of oxygen. So physiologically, their lungs and their hearts are larger than ours. So they do have somewhat of an advantage. But they're still human. And so we get up to the summit, or to the high camp, and it's like, okay. This time I got out of Camp 3 really early. I wasn't going to screw that up again. I was breathing a good dose of O's, a better flow rate. I had my goggles figured out. I was the first guy out of the tent. I wasn't the first guy to high camp, but I was close. So I got there at about 1 p.m., feeling good. It's like, yep.
Got this.
We got this. And the plan was to, at about 9 o'clock or so, 9:30 that night, get ready, get out of the tent, and go for the summit by 10:30, we'd hoped to. Well, at about 9 o'clock, it's pretty windy. It's like, do we go? Don't we go? I don't know. We're committing ourselves. We were the first folks to actually would be the first folks to summit that year. And in fact, the fixed ropes weren't fixed all the way to the summit, so that was going to happen. There were 3 expeditions that were up there, and about 25 people who were going to go for the summit, including Sherpas. And the Sherpas, some of the Sherpas were going to go ahead and fix the rest of the route, get those safety lines up way high. And some groups decided not to go that night, so we had less support, and we didn't get out of the tent until about 10 after 11 p.m. We finally decided we're going to go for it. The wind kind of died down. It was an absolutely spectacular, starry night. You could see some shooting stars, could see some thunderstorm way off in Tibet somewhere. But it was really cool, and we knew that at least now the weather was great.
And how were you feeling at this point? I mean, were you physically, mentally you were in a better space. How were you physically at that point?
I felt pretty good because I was able to drink and eat some. And I slept probably about 3 hours, which was great at that altitude.
A little bit of rest.
And felt like we had a really good attempt in this. So 5 of us left high camp, 5 Western climbers and 4 Sherpas. My Sherpa was Ming Mashiring. He was really quiet. And most Sherpas are pretty funny and great folks, but he was just kind of shy and quiet. And I had no idea of how strong he really was until that day unfolded. So about an hour out of camp, one of the Sherpas had some lower GI issues. You know, they're superhuman, but they are human.
Yeah.
And so he turned around.
Okay.
So now, unbeknownst to me at this point, Mingma took a third 17-pound bottle of oxygen to carry. So he took the extra bottle for the other guy, which is just amazing. So we climbed up to basically the halfway point up the triangular face, it's called, to the balcony at about 27,600 feet, something like that.
Okay.
So we get there, and it's a little bit late because he stopped there. Then we get up to that point, and one of the Sherpas, Panuru, his oxygen leaked. So he went down. So now there's 5 Westerners and just 2 Sherpas.
Right.
And the balcony is a point, the kind of the halfway point. That's where you leave your spent bottle of oxygen there. You take the full one for the summit run to go up, get the summit, come back down, and then when you get back to the balcony, you've got reserves left over, right? So that's the deal. So we get up there. So it took time with Panuru. It's like, okay, the clock is ticking away. And then we go part way up, and the fixed lines aren't that good, and they didn't bring as much rope. So I'm like, I'm not going. I want that protection. I promised I'd come home alive.
Yeah.
And Jason goes, yeah, just chill. He goes, it's a perfect day. He goes, we can probably cut some of the old fixed lines from previous years. We'll make it work. The route won't be quite as, we may miss some spots that aren't super dangerous, but we've got all the time in the world. The weather's perfect. Okay. So, but that cost about an hour and a half. So the clock's ticking.
Right, yeah.
So we're going up to the south summit of Everest, when then there's a little dip along then you go the southeast ridge. Okay. And it's kind of a knife's edge ridge, and you get to the Hillary Step. And then after the Hillary Step, it's supposed to be about 10 minutes more to the true summit, and pretty simple. So we're going up towards the south summit, and I look at my watch, which is an altimeter type watch. I'm going, oh, crap. It's 10:35 in the morning already. Okay. I'm doing the math. Once we get to the south summit, could take 3 hours round trip, even though it's vertically, it's only another 500 feet, but it's tricky. So I'm like, oh, geez, it's not going to go. Yeah. And I say to Jason, I go, dude, we're late. This isn't going well. Yeah. He goes, no, we're okay. I'm like, wow, he's normally pretty cautious. I go to Mingma. Mingma, we're running out of time. He goes, no, it's okay. We are fine. I'm like, so I climb for another 10, 15 minutes. I look at my watch again. It's still 10:35. Only it's not the time. And oxygen at that point, you're still breathing, and your mental acuity is not as sharp as you'd like it to be. Yeah. I mean, it's okay. But I realized that's the barometric pressure. So it's about 1/3 of what it is, because normally the barometer would read around, 3000, 29.95, something like that. But it's reading 10.35 because it's about 1/3 of the available oxygen. So I click my watch again, and I see what altitude we're at. I click it again, and it's 8:07 a.m.
So you're
I'm
okay.
Like, hey,
bonus.
I'm like, we just might make this work. And so I get to the south summit, and that's the first time you can actually see the true summit. Okay. And it is a pretty scary knife's edge ridge. I mean, it's technical, but it's not super hard. Okay. But you're at 28,700 feet.
So how are you feeling at that point? You're a relatively short distance away. This is in your mind where you've kind of thought about this now for years. So you get that phase. What are you feeling at that point?
Normally I get that adrenaline rush. And it's like, okay, I got this. Yeah. I'm like, I'm really tired. Okay. But everyone's really tired on Everest. So, okay. So I think Mingma and I are the last ones in our groups that kind of head down the south summit, and it's not maybe 60 vertical feet, not super far, and then on the ridge, and on the ridge is pretty airy, maybe 10,000 feet to the right in Tibet and 8,000 down into Nepal. Not exactly sure, but you're not going to stop. You're going to bounce on down. So that's like, wow, that's kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
And get to the Hillary Step, which is the last, the crux of that and the obstacle, and used my senders up there, climbed it reasonably well, but I'm going, wow, I'm really slow. I'm just slow.
Yeah.
I just feel like someone pulled the plug on me a bit. I'm like, okay. And then I did the cheesiest, stupid thing that I tell everyone not to do. As soon as I got to the top of the Hillary Step, I looked up and it's like, well, from there it's a cakewalk. But I'm going, that still looks pretty far.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do this. And here's the stupid question you ask. So I go to Mingma, how much farther are we have to go?
Dad,
and
are we almost there yet?
Exactly. And it's just awful. And he goes, well, only 10 minutes. And I go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that 10 minutes turned into 30 minutes and not quite to the summit. And some of our folks had already tagged the summit, but it's late now. It's pushing 2 p.m. That's way too late. We want to be up there by 10 in the morning or even earlier. And Jason looks at me and he's like, and he can't tell me what to do necessarily because he's unguided. He goes, dude, it's getting really late. So it's like, so Mingman and I kind of made it up to the summit.
Uh-huh.
People go, hey, what's it like to stand on top of the world? And I'm like, I really wouldn't know because I sat down there. I was so tired. And there was no, ecstasy. I had all these thoughts in my mind. And I hold up this flag and take lots of hero summit photos.
Yeah.
And my summit photo is pretty awful. My lips look blue. I look pretty bad. I took a picture of Mingma and we spent maybe 5 minutes, if that, up there.
Huh.
And I'm like, okay, well, going down will be better. But unbeknownst to me, which I would find out 2.5 days later, is I got pneumonia on summit day. And you can sometimes get high altitude pulmonary edema.
Okay.
But this was pneumonia. So I just got real slow. And I'm headed down. And I thought, well, head down, I'll do better. But I had to rest a lot. And then going down the Hillary Step is a 2-stage rappel. So I rappelled the first part, fine. Rappelled the second part. I went to put my foot down. And I kind of missed, and I got turned upside down.
Oh,
so all these extra fixed lines, I'm hanging around. I look like a fly in a spider's web kind of deal. I try to get myself right in, and by the time I'm working on that, trusty Mingma was there, and he cut some of the fixed lines away that I was tangled in, helped me there. But that took a lot out of me.
Sure.
So we're going along the southeast ridge, and then I saw we had to climb back up to the south summit. It was like 60 vertical feet. No big deal. I go, well, and I have my walkie-talkie, and I go, I'm just going to bivouac up here, which is take a sleep with no sleeping bag and stuff, because I'm really tired.
Okay.
And you could hear the concern at base camp. They can't do anything for me, and the other guys are already, a bit down. And if you can't get yourself down, no one can carry you at that altitude.
Right.
You have to get yourself down.
Yeah. So that's not even physically, you wouldn't have survived had you actually done that, right?
It would have been a long ice nap.
Okay.
I would
All
still
right.
be up there.
All
So finally they said, Kevin, what kind of medications you have? So I had something called nifedipine, dexamethasone. That's for cerebral edema, something for your head. And another kind of medication. But the one that really probably saved my life was the nifedipine, which was for your lungs.
Okay.
So again, I didn't know I had that, and pneumonia. So I took it, and I came to my senses. Like I said, your mental acuity is not always the sharpest. Even though you're breathing nose, you're still at altitude, and you're...
Because you said it only brings you down, what, about 3,000 feet?
4,000
feet. You're still, at that, you're 25,000 feet altitude, yeah.
So I finally realized, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
I can't stay here. This is crazy. And Mingma, God bless him, he was so calm. He was like, Kevin, please, we must go. And I'm like, okay. So I started up, and it was a slow climb to get to the south summit. Started heading down the south summit and, had to rest. And, it's pretty steep, so I just sitting back.
So what are you saying to yourself as you're doing this? Because
in zombie-like state a little bit. I know that I have to get down.
Yeah.
But my body's not working how I want it to work.
Exactly. So, it's just pure will.
Mm-hmm. And Mingma is like, Kevin, please, we must go.
Yeah.
And he'd let me rest, my 15, 20, 30, 40 seconds, and just kept sort of slowly not falling down the mountain exactly, but just coming down.
Yeah.
Sitting back, resting. And then my oxygen ran out. And I'm like, because we were up there so long. And I just kind of matter-of-factly said to Ming, oh, my oxygen ran out. He immediately undoes mine, undoes his. He gives me what's left in his bottle, carries down the other bottle. Now he's breathing without supplemental oxygen.
Amazing.
And because the international mountain guides have such great logistics, they're like, okay, this is kind of worrisome. So they sent up a couple of Sherpas to the balcony to meet us with extra oxygen and hot drinks, which is really awesome. And I hoped a sleeping bag because I wanted to sleep up there, but that wasn't going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So we're coming down, and now it gets dark at about 6:30. So it's dark.
Yeah.
You know, I have my headlamp, and Mingma doesn't have a headlamp, or his battery ran out. I forget. But and again, in that, I had an extra headlamp in my pack that I totally forgot that I could have given him. But anyways, we see a couple of headlamps coming up. I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm going to be able to sleep here at the balcony.
Yeah.
I'm like, nope. So they got Mingma his own oxygen. I got extra oxygen at a higher rate, and they helped. We all came down. I got some hot drinks. But I didn't get back to high camp until 10:15 p.m. that night.
Wow. So it's 24
almost
hours.
24 hours.
Yeah.
Almost 24 hours. So I thought, well, once I'm at a high camp breathing O's, I'll feel better.
Yeah.
I
And you didn't know at this point you had pneumonia.
had no idea.
Okay.
So pretty fitful night. Next morning, the plan, this is pretty normal, was to descend down to Camp 2. From basically 26,200 to about 21,300, and you got to go down the Lhotse face. And there's a few rappel areas, and I'm like, man, I thought I'd feel good the next day. Most people do, and I just didn't. And so very slowly made my way down. Now we're without the Sherpas at this point. There's just the five of us, Westerners. Slow go to finally get to Camp 2. Like, well, thick air. I'll be fine now.
Sure.
Only I wasn't. So I'm still breathing O's and doing the best I can. Next morning, we have to go down through the Western Coombe and then through the ice fall, the last barrier. And, you know, normally that would have been, I don't know, going that way, maybe 4 hours, 4.5. Coming up would, you know, obviously be more. But I was slower coming down than going up because I just didn't know what was wrong. So we finally, Brian and I were the last two guys. He and I went through it, and I had a pretty heavy pack at that point. Finally get through the ice fall, and I always imagined, you know, having summited, and it's called Crampon Point, which is at the base of the ice fall, and that's when you take your spikes off there, you know you're out of major danger, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to die. And so I just imagined how that great a feeling, and I was like, ugh, you know. There's a picture of Brian and me as we got back to base camp, and he had a little bronchitis as well, but I'm just a mess, and our expedition leader down at base camp, the manager, if you will, said, there's a medical tent. We're going to just get you checked out. So I go in there, and they immediately go, oh, you have pneumonia, because they can hear my lungs rattling. You have a fever of 101 degrees. I also was wicked dehydrated, so they gave me IV fluids. So I probably had 5 bags of IV fluids. And they sat with me overnight, and I felt a lot better the next morning. But, you know, I was still pretty well beat up, but they did an amazing job of looking after me. And they're like, hey, if we can get a chopper in here, we might want to, just as a precaution, get you into Kathmandu and into a hospital. I'm like, okay. So that was my first helicopter ride, and it was pretty dicey because the weather wasn't perfect.
Well, and you've got no air, so helicopter ride at that altitude can't be too safe, you know?
Right. So, yeah, and there's a crashed helicopter at the near base camp from the year before where 3 people died.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like, So take the helicopter ride in, and I think I'm going to probably spend a couple days in the hospital, but it was so awesome. I go to this clinic, and the doctor goes, yeah, you have pneumonia here in your left lung, but they've given you good medication, and your fever's gone. You're doing great. Finish your Z-pack of some antibiotics or whatever, and here's some cough lozenges. You're free to go. I'm like, sweet.
Oh, wow.
I'm sprung.
Yeah.
So I went from the summit of Everest on a Saturday to being in Kathmandu on a Wednesday morning where it's warm and wonderful, and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm going to have lunch. I'm feeling better.
So at this point, I mean, did the magnitude of what you just accomplished, it still hadn't hit you?
It hadn't hit me at all. I'm still in kind of a fog, and I have lunch, and I'm like, I can have a beer, sure. So I have a beer, and I'm like, and I'm pretty happy, and I took, you know, multiple showers, and that felt great. And because the chopper can't carry much weight at that altitude, my duffels, all my equipment. I only have one small little pack. They left it there, and they said, we'll get it to you.
Okay. So
someone advised me, well, wait for your duffels. So they weren't going to be back into Kathmandu till about probably 4 or 5 days later.
Okay.
I'm like, and Eric Simonson was actually, who went for the first part of the trip, but was back in Seattle. He called me, just make sure, and he was really cool. And make sure, I thought he was going to yell at me for being a nuisance, but he couldn't have been more awesome. And he's like, oh, man, don't rot in Kathmandu. Get back home and see Maggie. We'll take care of your bag. So then I feverishly arranged for getting a flight because I had to change my flights. And I had no problem going from Kathmandu to Bangkok. But to get to Bangkok through, I guess I was going to go through Hong Kong, Bangkok to Hong Kong. That was okay. But Hong Kong to Vancouver and then Vancouver to New York was problematic. And they're tippy-tapping away on their the ticket agent. And they're like, we can't get you home until like May 31st. I'm like, look at me. So they said, well, we can upgrade you to business class, but it's going to be, it wasn't that much, maybe $1,300 or $1,400. Okay. So finally, and I'm coughing. I definitely am coughing a lot.
Sure.
I get to the flight. I spent one night in Bangkok, and then get to Hong Kong on economy class. And then I get on the plane. And they go, oh, right this way, Mr. Flynn. And I sit down in business class on an Asian carrier.
Yeah. I
can't kick the seat in front of me.
Yeah.
And I'm, beat up, and they're like, would you like some French champagne, Mr. Flynn? Well, yeah. So you asked, when did the magnitude sort of hit me? Well, first of all, the food was pretty good in first class, and vintage wine. It's not like I got wasted or anything, but just savoring it. It was great. And they had Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And, you aren't eating that well. So I lost probably 20, 25 pounds. Wow. And I'm like, this is great. And I watched a movie called Touching the Void, which is a climbing movie. Yeah. But after that, I was like, well, I could sleep. But I go, I don't want to sleep. I just listen to music with my headset. So when you say about the magnitude of it all kicking in, that's kind of when it did. And it felt absolutely surreal. Yeah. Like, did it really happen, or was it a dream? And I'm like, it really happened. And I'm in first class coughing. You would hate being near me. And I'm going, and I just kept listening to music. And if you sat next to me, you'd have thought I was a little touched in the head because I'm just grinning, and I'm replaying the hard drive in my mind about how all this went. And it was, it would have been cool if I just got up there and tagged the summit and got down and was really healthy. And in fact, probably went overnight. One of the doctors was, I was lamenting to her, oh my God, I wish I was a better teammate. Some of the Sherpas had to come up. I was a real inconvenience for everyone. Geez, I didn't do it in the kind of style I want. She goes, hey, look, I don't know why you guys do what you do. He goes, but you just climbed Mount Everest and got down with pneumonia on your own. And you go, you should feel pretty good about that. So she kind of gave me permission to feel...
reset your brain a little bit.
Yeah, she gave me permission to feel good. And I was like, well, a mere mortal couldn't have survived that. But of course I did. No. But no, I was just, so thankful. So on that flight home, I'm just, I don't know, it's 10, 12-hour flight to Vancouver or whatever it is, crazy long. And I'm just so happy. I didn't want to sleep. I just wanted to keep drinking it all in and replaying it and going, this really happened. So I was able to get from the summit of Everest on a Saturday, and was all the way back and home in Rochester on Friday. So that's ridiculously fast to go from the summit to get back home.
Really?
It would have taken another probably 5-6 days. So it was a whirlwind. So anyways, that was that Everest adventure.
Unbelievable. What an amazing story. And, in so many metaphors for life, really, in what you accomplished. It's the obstacles that we have to overcome. I mean, we all have our mountains, or what seems like mountains. Not necessarily the physical ones, but the whether it's somebody who's they're trying to get a position in their career, or they're struggling with some aspect of their personal lives, and so I'm curious, Kevin, in climbing all of these mountains and doing this journey, what kind of life lessons did you learn along the way that you've been able to, kind of port to everyday life?
Yeah, I like to fly and an instrument-rated flyer and being an entrepreneur. I think there's so many similarities between running a business, and instrument flying, in the clouds, and high altitude mountaineering. So there's the mental aspect of it, staying focused. No one that I've ever known who's a business owner would say, "Oh yeah, I was an overnight success immediately. Everything worked great. We never had any troubles." So one of the lessons is there are going to be obstacles along the way, and you're just going to have to break through them. You're going to have to deal with it. That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All that cliche kind of stuff. But it was, not making Everest was the first time was kind of a godsend because it made me stronger and better and smarter. And in our own business, we almost went bankrupt in the late 80s, early 90s. We were right up against it. So, that idea of persistence, there's an old football coach who's like, paralyzed resistance with persistence. So, one of those life lessons is, what? If you're a junkyard dog and you keep after it, eventually good things will happen. The joke of a lot of those. Yeah, I was an overnight success. It took 10 years, but so that worked out. And then the mental aspects of it, trying to stay positive when things aren't always going your way, and accepting that a lot of things aren't in your control. The whole deal about trying not to over worry about things, because that's really negative energy that doesn't help. Move the ball forward kind of deal. Yep. Other lessons you learn is that, hey, no one is infallible. Yeah. It's, you could do everything right and something bad could still happen to you, whether it's in business, flying. You can mitigate the dangers as much as you want. And that's the other good thing that I learned is risk mitigation. Mm-hmm. At some point, there's a quote, someone says, a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships were made for. Right. So getting yourself out there and taking some risks, moving outside of your comfort zone. Sometimes in business you make decisions and you don't know. You hope you can see around the corner, but you don't know if what you decided to do and invest in is going to really pay off or not, or be a colossal mistake. Yeah. And accepting and overcoming mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes. So, and in flying, I learned a lot of that kind of stuff, that especially the risk mitigation. A lot of great decision-making happens before you ever take off. Yeah. And a lot of accidents happen before they took off because they made bad decisions before they went. And there's usually an accident chain. So it's not one thing that goes bad. Mm-hmm. It's two things go bad. You can kind of deal with it. Three things go bad. It's a real problem. Like on a mountain, you might go, well, I feel terrible, but the weather's perfect. Yeah. And you go and get away with it. I feel terrible. The weather's coming in. It seems to be getting worse, and I didn't have any rest or whatever it is. That's kind of a recipe for disaster. So learning some of those things as far as risk management. You want to do things that are a bit risky, but you don't want to suffer the ultimate price. Exactly. That makes sense.
So, Kevin, here's the for so many people, myself included, people are, they have dreams and aspirations. They've got some picture of the life they want to build. I think most people have that, but then they step back and they look at somebody like yourself and all that you've accomplished in life, and you seem, it's almost superhuman. Like how can you do those things? But I couldn't. I couldn't do those kinds of things. And so we kind of rationalize why others can do it and we can't. And what I love in your story is that you haven't painted yourself as some superhuman, or you're a regular guy who has accomplished incredible things. I'm curious, knowing all that you've learned through the course of this journey, and you said a lot of it was kind of accidental. I didn't set out when I was 17 years old and say I'm going to climb the 7 highest summits on the 7 continents. But if you could go back and give your 17-year-old self advice with everything that you've learned, through the course of the journey, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, well, at 17, I probably wouldn't listen to me, so there's that problem. Like I said, a lot of it was accidental, and a lot sort of became selfish too. I did things I really liked. I never really set out like to do this, Evan. There are people who go, all right, that's a bucket list thing. And it's like, I just really liked mountains, and they just got bigger. And once you did one thing, it's like, well, I could do this. So I guess the advice I would give, and in our business, it's kind of cool. I'm probably a few years away from retiring, and it's now a third generation. My brother's daughter is working with us, and son too. But the daughter is been there longer, and we're trying to nurture and mentor her to go to hopefully be a succession plan for my brother and me eventually. And she's doing great, and it's awesome. So it is helpful and my father was a good mentor for me, but it's helpful to say, okay, you're going to have bad days. You know what? There are going to be things that seem insurmountable, but it'll be okay. You're stronger and better than you have any idea that you are. And if you're, some of my great mentors, some who didn't even know they were a mentor, like my client, Ed Stack at Dick's Sporting Goods, in a way is a mentor, and I don't know, did he set out to be it?
Sure.
But one of his great qualities, and one that I strive for with some folks, and certainly with Chris's daughter Katie at our shop, is to try and make her better than she thinks she can be. Yeah. I mean, she is really good. So I would tell my 17-year-old self is don't put a governor on you. I mean, like your metaphor with the rungs on the ladder, I guess, is that you can accomplish so much more than you have any idea that's in there. I mean, it may not happen tomorrow, but, I'm not superhuman. I did things I really liked. I got the requisite skills and training and that I needed to do to try and get to the next level. But I did it because I really liked it. And the other thing I would tell my 17-year-old self is to pursue your passion. Yeah. I'm going to screw up this quote, but this guy Howard Thurman has this great passion, and he goes, "Don't do what other people." I'm going to screw it up, but it's basically find your passion in life. Don't ask what others think of you. Find that what you want to do that you really love, and go do it. Find your passion, and things will work out if you are passionate about it. So I was lucky, that things like that just sort of fell in place. Yeah. So
that's pretty darn good advice, And really for all of us, to recognize that there's so much more in us. There's when you were talking earlier, and I remember, I think it's the Navy SEALs. They talk about, I think it's the 40% or something like that. They've got this rule that when you think you're on the edge and there's nothing more, you got 40% more in the tank, kind of thing,
Yeah.
So to remind ourselves of that, and to your point, don't be afraid to dream, because you never know right where those dreams will lead you.
Yeah. So like I said, I was really lucky that the things I liked just sort of fell into became great passions, and it's sort of an lucky accident, And as far as work, I've never had. My clients are my bosses, if you will, but I never had a boss.
Yep.
I got to climb amazing mountains, and beyond just the 7 summits. I was just in the Adirondacks last weekend and climbed a mountain there, and it's still fun and great. And flying, I get a lot of satisfaction. I fly mostly for business. That was the other weird, to sort of circle back to that accident of flying. I never flew at all until I was 25 years old, commercial, private, otherwise, anything. And it was cool. I loved it because I was going on a vacation in Florida, and it was really awesome, and I liked it. But then when our biggest client at the time was Dick's Sporting Goods, when they moved from Binghamton in 1994 to Pittsburgh, they moved their headquarters. We had to go there at least 3 times a month, and 3 of us had to go there, and it was on our own nickel. So we would, U.S. Air was a hub at that point in Pittsburgh, so it was great, direct flights. But they had you. That were the only game in town. Right. And I think without a Saturday night stay and all that nonsense, and this back in 94, it was like $560 per round trip per person, times 3, and then times 3 per month. So it's almost like $6,000 a month.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. And occasionally we would drive, but that was just too much to do. So finally, we had to take someone from Cleveland and charter them to Rochester for a shoot.
Okay.
And they had to be somewhere in Cleveland that morning. We really wanted that person. And my younger brother looked at all the chartering options for plane from Cleveland to Rochester. From a Learjet all the way down to a single-engine plane.
Okay.
Single-engine planes are cheap.
Yeah.
At that point. He goes, we should learn to fly. We could fly to Pittsburgh. He goes, it was his idea. Yeah. And I was, at this point, I'd become a white-knuckle flyer in the airlines. I don't know why, but turbulence bothered me. What's that? That's the landing gear coming down, you idiot. Relax. Like, ugh. So I'm like, well, he goes, we'll learn to fly. Here's the deal. We could rent a flight instructor for the day, and they're trying to build hours. So that was only $150. And you could rent the plane, and a single-engine plane, with fuel, $300. So for $450, we would get a lesson. Yeah, less. And we would be able to fly down to Pittsburgh. So I would fly left seat, and the instructor be in the right, the other two folks back there, and then my brother Chris would fly and get a lesson on the way back.
Okay.
Well, he got real close to his pilot's license, but he had 3 young kids at home. And smartly, he goes, if I can't stay current, proficient, and all those kinds of stuff, I don't think I'm going to be safe enough. So I really liked it, and so I that's how I learned to fly, by accident. And it became a great business tool, and I bought a plane at the end of 2003. I'm on my second airplane. It's a single-engine Cirrus SR-22 Turbo, great airplane. You know, I've gone to Florida a bunch, but visiting clients and trying to gain new clients throughout the Northeast. Yeah. So absolutely wonderful business tool. Like I went to Dick's last Wednesday. Week ago Wednesday, we had a 1:30 meeting. I went to my office first in Pittsford, left there at about 10 o'clock, got to the airport, have our meeting, back home for dinner, no problem. And we control the schedule, keep your shoes on, all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, another happy accident.
Another happy, well, you know, sometimes the best things in life we don't oftentimes realize in the moment are the best things in life, you know.
Yeah,
and
true.
The lessons that we carry away. Well, Kevin, thank you so much.
Sure, my pleasure.
For coming in and sharing some time with us today. What a phenomenal story, and what phenomenal lessons you've learned along the way. You know, a life well lived.
Yeah, well, I feel very, very fortunate. So thanks.
Thank
David.
you, Kevin.
Hey guys, one more thing before you take off. This is Motivational Intelligence Insider. It's just a very short, exclusive email every Monday that comes from Dave, John, and the guests on this show. This is the only place they share their very, very best stuff, and it's delivered right to your inbox every single Monday. This could include exclusive tips for upping your game, articles they're reading, videos they're watching, stories from the road, and on and on. It's the best way to kick off your week, and this content comes directly from Dave, John, and the guests, and is only available to subscribers of Motivational Intelligence Insider. So if you want these guys and gals to email you their best stuff, go to 2logical.com/insider. That's the number 2logical.com/insider, and drop in your email. And if you do, I hope you enjoy it.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is produced by the team at 2Logical. 2Logical is an international corporate training firm and the world's leading expert in motivational intelligence, which is the ability to understand, manage, and change the motives people have. 2Logical offers over 30 different keynotes, workshops, and full training courses to small, medium, and large Fortune 500 companies in 53 countries, a lot of which you're probably familiar with: Pfizer, Bank of America, GE, Constellation Brands, P&G, and more. All solutions are completely customized, and the feedback from these sessions will blow your mind. If you have any training or speaking needs, or just want to say hey, head over to 2logical.com.